I will not tell you that you should use mind over matter techniques. Those are not helpful when you actually have an anxiety disorder or if you're someone that lives with severe anxiety. Hi, my channel is for women recovering from childhood trauma who want to stop surviving and start thriving. I'm Dr. Shamaya Vaughn. Listen to this channel if you want to hear my thoughts on how women, transgender women, and gender nonconforming people can choose a new path today and start creating a life they love. Although I am a professor and a licensed therapist, the work I am doing here on this YouTube channel is for personal coaching sessions. Some of you do not need talk therapy anymore. You need a few coaching sessions to implement your action plan. So today, we're going to talk about and examine your thought pattern when you are upset or stressed out about something. This exercise that I'm going to teach you will help you navigate the negative emotions or feelings that you're experiencing. The best antidote for anxiety is an action plan. Trust me, I've experienced it. So we're going to do a 5-step process for examining your thoughts, your anxious thoughts, right? Not just the regular thoughts, but the anxious and nervous thoughts, the worry, the concern. So the first step, we will discuss a typical situation that causes you anxiety. I want you to take a moment and think about the last time you felt really anxious and what was going on. You have that in your mind? Okay, good. The second part is we're going to talk about the feelings that you had or have in that situation. Although it is a situation that causes anxiety, your feelings may be more complicated, right? Is it fear and anxiety, or is it sadness and depression, or is it guilt and shame, or is it anger? Right? And so when you think about that situation, you have to think about it in 3 parts. What was the trigger, right? What triggered that anxiety? And then what was your response to what happened? And then finally, what was the outcome? What happened as a result of your response, right? So let's choose the feeling that you feel when you are anxious. And we will work through the next 3 steps focused on this negative feeling. So the third step in conquering your anxiety, this is where we match your feelings and emotions to your thoughts. I will help you match your thoughts with the emotion. So if you are experiencing fear and anxiety when you're triggered, ask yourself, what bad thing do I expect to happen? What kind of danger am I in? If your emotion is about sadness and depression, I want you to ask yourself, what have I lost hope in? What is missing in my life? Or what is missing in me as a person? What's the hole, right? And then if you're feeling guilt or shame, right, you want to ask yourself, what bad thing have I done? And you want to be honest. What bad thing have I done? And then the next question is, what is wrong with me? If you are feeling anger at the bottom of your anxiety, you want to ask yourself, what is unfair about this situation? Who has wronged me? And you can see with those questions that we're getting to what's underneath the anxiety so that you can just face it. You can face it and you can develop a plan of action. These questions help you identify the thoughts that are upsetting you. Anxiety is all about thoughts. It's just an inner dialogue going on. Try to be as specific as possible when identifying upsetting thoughts, right? So let's focus on your responses to the questions. You may have had more upsetting thoughts related to a situation. There are 3 more questions that may help you examine other upsetting thoughts about the situation. For example, What would it mean if the worst case scenario happened? What would that mean? What would that look like? If the worst case scenario happened, what would happen then? Right? And then what? Third question, what would be so bad about the worst case scenario happening? Ooh, sit with that heaviness, okay? And then out of all the upsetting thoughts you have named, which is the most upsetting? That's what we have to focus on when we're talking about anxiety. So the fourth step of this anxiety conquering mission is to test the accuracy of this one upsetting thought, right? You don't want to have 80 upsetting thoughts because it's really difficult to zero in. So pick one upsetting thought and then ask yourself, where is the evidence to support this thought? Yeah, that's the question. Where's the evidence? I want you to consider evidence to the contrary, right? So if you have evidence that support your upsetting thought, where's the evidence that your thought is inaccurate? You want to do both. When we're in coaching, we need to take action, and we can't spend a lot of time processing the past. That's for therapy. In coaching, right, the sessions are a little shorter. The time together is a little shorter. So you want to move quickly through this process. You have your evidence for and against? Good. Okay. So let's go even deeper about this one thought. Is there any other way of looking at the situation? And when I say any other way, I want you to consider just going ahead and thinking about how someone else would view it. Another question, is there an alternative explanation for what happened? So this is not another way of looking, this is not another viewpoint. This is maybe there's some missing data and there's another explanation for what happened. Another question, how would someone else think about the situation, right? Not another viewpoint, but how would someone else? In therapy, we have different theories that we use, and every theory has a different viewpoint, right? Has a different way of thinking about a problem. You're going to do this in coaching with your coach. You're going to talk about how someone else would view this. And it could be historical, fictional, or someone in your life like a friend, right? So imagine that person that you highly regard, right, or admire, and how would they look at this? How would they think about this? Okay, another question for you, because anxiety is a liar. Yep, I called it out. It's a liar. So is your concern based more on how you feel than the actual facts of the situation? Again, anxiety is a liar. Another question, are you placing unrealistic or unobtainable standards on yourself that you would never expect other people to achieve? I'm calling out the perfectionists here, the people that think everything has to be aligned or perfect before you can make a decision or determine how you feel about something. When I was getting trained as a professor, part of being a professor is publishing. You have to publish articles, you have to write book chapters, you have to write books. Like, you need to do something to put your thoughts out in the world. And we were coached into not waiting until something is 100% before we submit it, turn it in at 80%. You're going to get feedback anyway. Done is always better than working on it or delaying it. Okay? Done is better than perfection. Put your stuff out there. Okay, so when you're talking about standards for yourself, you need to bring them down a notch because you don't have those standards for anyone else in your life but you. Stop being your own bully and bring that down a notch. Another question, are you overestimating how much control and responsibility you have in this situation? A lot of times people say they have goals like, I want to get a job. Please sit with me on this. You have no control over that. You can apply. You can't make someone give you an interview. You can interview. You can't make someone give you a respectable job offer. right? You can accept the job offer. You can't control whether or not the company will rescind it or they will add some things on there that's unpleasant for you. So a lot of times goals like I want to get married, I want a good job, those things require other people to have input. You do what you can on your end. You're going to be for jobs, right? We'll do that example. Let's say you're anxious about applying for jobs. You can control your LinkedIn profile, your social media content. You can control what your CV looks like or your resume. You can control what the cover letter looks like. Those are things within your control. You can control networking, right? Getting to know people that already work in the company. You can control how you show up for an interview. You can control how you negotiate a job offer. Those are things within your control. Landing everything is not within your control. That's someone else's decision. Another question I want you to think about. What would be the worst thing that could happen if this fear of yours, if this anxiety were true, right? Again, the worst case scenario. What would be the worst thing about it? Another question, are you not considering everything you can do to deal with the problem or situation? A lot of times we meet with our coach and we are brainstorming things that we want to change or solutions to a problem. When you're brainstorming, you throw all of the spaghetti at the wall, right, to see what sticks. The second phase of brainstorming is removing things that don't fit, like they're not aligned with your values or it's just impossible for you to do on your own, right? So that leaves everything else. You have to be so expansive in your thinking when you're trying to solve a problem. You can't do things the same way you're doing them because that's what got you stuck. That's what got you here. So you have to be open to new and creative ideas. The last question I want you to consider is, are you thinking that because a low probability event happened to you before in your past, that it is very likely to happen to you again, right? So one time you went on stage and you fainted, right? Or you lost your voice, or you got so nervous, or people were heckling you, whatever happened, right? Are you living your life rehashing that event over and over and not making new choices because you're afraid of what happened in the past? It's just a question, no judgment. The fifth and last part of this process of conquering your anxiety, in this step, this last step, you make a decision and or you make a plan based on that decision. So we discussed evidence to separate your feelings from emotions. To push back against anxiety, you have to be objective so you can understand the situation and accurately take informed, effective action steps. If you have bad data, the action step will not work, right? So how do we create action plans in a step-by-step manner? We have to start with defining the problem accurately. A lot of times you look for a solution before you have really honed in on what the problem is. So the problem is, oh, no one will call me for an interview. No, the problem is perhaps the materials you are putting forth and the social networking piece of applying for jobs are not aligned. That's just an example. That's not blame. That's an example of honing in on a problem. Right now, the problem could be a poor job market, or maybe your job is being phased out by AI. You want to get the problem accurately described before you move on to a solution. And then two, we do that spaghetti thing, right? We brainstorm as many possible solutions as possible, and we select the best one or ones to try. So when we throw spaghetti at the wall, like I said, some of it will stick. Like, okay, that looks like a doable plan. That plan is ridiculous, right? But in the brainstorming session, everything goes at the wall. You have to throw everything in so that you have something to pull out of it. The next step is to make a plan to implement one of solutions. We call this plan A. Okay, so if I'm having trouble even getting an interview when I'm applying for jobs, maybe I need to track all my applications or resume submissions. That's plan A. I need to add some social capital in there, right? And we see if it lands at an interview. We give it, we follow the plan, we schedule a time to determine if it is resolved, right? If you get an interview within 3 months, let's say you're going to give it 3 months to try this new plan of yours, then it's time to go back to the spaghetti wall, right, and try plan B. And you do the same thing. You try it out, you give it a month, or maybe you give it 2 months or 3 months. Some people only give things a week. I don't think that's enough time to see a turnaround. But this is how we conquer anxiety.